So let's see. This is chapter 4, section 3, Love Without Conflict. It is hard to understand what the kingdom of heaven is within you really means. This is because it is not understandable to the ego, which interprets it as if something outside is inside, and this does not mean anything. The word within is unnecessary. The kingdom of heaven is you. What else but you did the Creator create? And what else but you is the Creator's kingdom, is the kingdom. This is the whole message of the atonement, a message which, in its totality, transcends the sum of its parts. You, too, have a kingdom that your spirit created. It has not ceased to create because of the ego's illusions. Your creations are no more fatherless than you are. Your ego and your spirit will never be co-creators. Your spirit and your creator. Be confident that your creations are as safe as you are.
Kim, would you like to say a word or two about atonement?
Oh boy, we need to work our way to it.
Is that too much of a jump?
If you think, what I would like to start with perhaps is coming fresh into A Course in Miracles. There's all these concepts. It presents things in an
shouting at you, Tim.
No. Am I audible?
You're just kind of.
Who hears me?
You're doing a strobe light thing with your voice.
Don't even see your face anymore either.
It's frozen.
Internet. Okay.
Internet.
So Karen, you get to do this.
Oh, I couldn't possibly. I don't know the course the way Tim does. I'm learning though, like the rest of you.
So we all.
He's gone.
He's gone. Shabana, you want to say a word or two about atonement?
I'm too shy.
But well practiced.
Stop laughing, Teresa.
Matthew, the quick version of atonement is it's self-forgiveness. It's just the continual willingness to look at what we're seeing in the world and how that is a reflection of what is a part of us, and then bringing self-forgiveness to it, to everything.
Exactly what I'm going through now with Tara Bruck. So that's good. So
that's how I interpret it anyway. I'm sure Tim has other things to say. Anybody else want to chime in about atonement?
I have something to say. I'm Canadian, and here we've got a very rich family called the Bronfmans. And they own the biggest distillery here in Canada. And Samuel Bronfman, the story does have a point, and I will eventually get to it. And I hope it's before Tim comes back. So anyway, so what happened is I was out for my walk, and I was thinking of Samuel Bronfman because he is famous for saying, I don't get heart attacks, I give them, right? So I'm walking by the river and I'm thinking, Samuel Bronfman, Atonement City. So I atoned for him.
But you actually atone for yourself, because the atonement is, it's asking for forgiveness of yourself because of how you are seeing Mr. Brockman.
Well, see, he sets the standard for Canadian business, or he did, right? but I read this in some best-selling book about 90 years ago. I'm 91, so I learned to read early. And I was very impressed, you know? And this is truly how Canadian business operates. And so you're right, I atone for myself, but because he's a leader, you know, captain of industry, all of Canada is influenced by it, including moi. So yeah, I atoned for myself, but that is the general belief. Is
Thank
Tim?
you.
Yeah,
Tim
you're quite welcome.
Thank you, Shabana.
Yes, I'm too shy to talk, so I'll be quiet.
Oh, that was wonderful. Thank you. Just a little
Thank you.
reminder that atonement is always self-forgiveness because of our perception, our wrong-minded thinking.
Well,
And of
I
course,
definitely believed him, Karen. I did believe him when I was 1 year old. But over the past 90 years, I have atoned.
the past 90 years.
I mean, maybe I just got back from my walk about 30 minutes ago. So sorry, my time, it's a senior's moment.
Love you, Shabana.
Hello.
Thank you for sharing.
You're
Yes.
welcome.
Love you, Shabana. And is this audible? Is this connection good?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Sorry.
It's all right.
That's okay. I noticed you're recording, Tim, and so I want to thank you for that.
Oh, well, I was going to say my answer, but Karen already said it before I said it. Thank you, Shabana. Okay. So, so I heard some talk about the atonement, and let's work our way there. The A Course in Miracles, quintessential A Course in Miracles is taking a concept that we've taken to be a given in our life, in the world, how we see things, and then flipping it seemingly upside down. So essentially making us rethink what these things mean. Now, really, what I'd say a basic goal of A Course in Miracles is to show us that the way that the ego sees the world, and this is just a definition, this is just, it defines ego as the thing which sees the world upside down. And A Course in Miracles sets out to show us that the ego, which is really any identification with ourself that's limited. So whether it be a name, a role, a job, a history, or a circumstance, anything that we could label, anything that we can, call ourselves, is limiting, because it's implying that it's nothing but that, or it's that and nothing else. So that is really ego self. It's the limited self. By definition, ego, if it's body, our body is limited. There's an end to it. It takes up a certain amount of space and nothing more. So this ego self, this ego identity, sees the world upside down. It takes things upside down, but because it sees things upside down, always, to the ego, upside down is really right side up. So everything that is upside down just seems normal. A Course in Miracles forces us to turn the world upside down and see it right side up. Now, in so doing, it seems that we are turning the world upside down. But really what it is, it's the first step in true vision and seeing the world right side up for the first time. So in this first paragraph, when we're told right off the bat, it's hard to understand what the kingdom of heaven is within you really means. This is because it is not understandable to the ego, which interprets it as if something outside is inside, and this does not mean anything. This is exactly the kind of thought that A Course in Miracles forces us to think. The kingdom of heaven is within you. Clearly, that's Bible, that's the Gospels where this is said. But it's brought here to our attention because the language carries over to here. The kingdom of heaven is within you. And then it goes further into saying that really this could be shortened to the kingdom of heaven is you. Now, when reading that from an ego perspective, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't register, and ego mind just says, I don't understand, I don't want to think about it. But A Course in Miracles shows us that, well, just give a little willingness. This is why this is actually true. The kingdom of heaven is you. And this is a truth. This is a truth. It's within you, sure, but it is you, because what else but you did our Creator create? One of these things which is upside down in the ego's perspective is this whole concept of there's a distinction in the ego between being and having. So the ego obtains and owns things, always physical things, whether it's a book or an apple or a dollar. It's always a physical thing. And the ego takes this as what it means to have something, to have an apple. An ego would say, I have an apple. And in the same way, now all these physical things are in the physical world, which is really neutral. It's a neutral existence. If I have an apple and I give you an apple, I no longer have the apple and you have the apple. So there's only one apple. It goes from place to place by giving the apple. Somebody else gets an apple, obtains an apple. Now, what the ego does is it projects the workings of this world, this physical world, onto the kingdom of heaven, onto spirit, onto mind. So ego tries to hold on to things like ideas or love or joy. The ego tries to make us believe, and really it's just ego mind, which is us. When we choose ego mind, we are believing that giving an idea means that we're losing the idea. Giving love means that we're losing love. Giving joy means we're losing joy. But as all ancient texts and just wisdom, timeless wisdom shows us, love is grown by sharing. By sharing love, we add love into existence. By sharing truth, by sharing even ideas. When I have an idea, and I have an idea, we can say I have an idea, and I share it with somebody, I still have the entire idea, and now all of a sudden somebody else has the idea. It has grown in substance by its sharing. So this is how the kingdom of heaven, spirit, reality, the real world, that's how this works. So sharing love is the only way for us to have love. Sharing truth is the only way for us to have truth. Teaching is the only way for us to learn. All of these things seem contradictory to the ego, seems upside down, but really it's only because the ego is seeing things upside down on the earth. And I only see Shabana's lovely face right now, so if anybody wants to just chime in, feel free. So atonement, I know that there was a request for atonement, and I think from what I heard, I think we all have a pretty decent understanding of atonement, at least at face value, at least the basic way to think about it. Atonement, now we get to this part in this paragraph where it says, this is the whole message of the atonement. And the atonement is a very important concept in A Course in Miracles. It may be the concept, the most important concept, the concept which is the root of A Course in Miracles is this atonement. And atonement, at its essence, is forgiveness of self, recognizing that There is nothing outside of ourselves that we can forgive. There is nothing to forgive because nobody can do anything to us. Nothing can happen to us. It's always how we perceive what's going on. So when we forgive, now this is one of those flip things where ego definition of forgiveness is you did something wrong, but I will be the morally good person and I forgive you. You're even though you're wrong, I forgive you and it's okay. Now that's not forgiveness. That's making error real. That's giving substance to the error, or at least trying to. Atonement, really the statement of atonement is I forgive myself all my misperceptions of the past. The only thing we can forgive, our own misperceptions of the past. Whether it's somebody hurting us emotionally or physically, whether it's something happening, it's always how we've chosen to perceive the event that does the damage. It's not the snake bite that kills, it's the venom that's left behind. And we're in charge of that venom. We're in charge of how we choose to see things. If somebody is screaming at us, clearly, if we remove ourselves from the situation, somebody's screaming for seemingly no apparent reason. This person is asking for love. I mean, who in peace sets out to attack somebody? Nobody. So this is a request for love. Now, what can we do? Really, in any situation, in a request for love, we give love. And when we are given love, we give love. It's always the answer is to respond in love. When we don't respond in love, that's what requires the atonement. So if there's an action and we don't respond with love, we respond with a call for love. That's okay. That's why we have the atonement. The atonement is just making the statement. Hold on. I forgive myself my misperceptions of the past. And what's interesting is from this statement, it's a statement to reality, a statement to being, a statement to God. One, that accepting responsibility for our perceptions. And two, we begin to expand our concept of self. I forgive myself all my misperceptions of the past. That could start out, the beauty of this is it could start out with the ego self. It could start out with just body self. That could be a start, but it doesn't take long before that self starts to expand, because from this center of being, making that choice of forgiving ourselves, we extend that outwards into the world. So we forgive ourselves, and from this unconditional self-forgiveness, we forgive everybody else unconditionally, because that's just a decision we've made. If it's something that we treat ourselves with, we treat all others with. So the line between self and others, just by making this statement.
So I would just like to emphasize that the self-forgiveness, as you've said several times now, is about our perceptions. It's not about that we've done somebody else wrong, just as the forgiveness of any other kind of forgiveness where we think somebody else has done wrong to us. The word self-forgiveness is so heavily laden with I did something to myself or to somebody else. So I just wanted to drive that point home that the self-forgiveness is about our perceptions, solely about our perceptions, not about our actions or our doings.
Yes, thank you, Karen. And certainly about perceptions. Certainly, really, any instance that we have, and really it's also maybe can be rooted in judgment, which is rooted in perceptions. They kind of go hand in hand. Any judgment we make, if we think that something needs atonement, then it probably does. If we think something's wrong, that's what needs the atonement, is our perception that it's wrong. If we think something's bad, whether we did it, somebody else did it, somebody we don't know did it. It's our misperception of this event, of this part of God that we're labeling wrong. We're labeling bad or hurtful. Is it hurtful? Is it wrong? Who's to decide? We're to decide. So just that judgment, just that perception, that's what needs the forgiveness. And as soon as we act, as soon as we set that intention,
As soon as we do, we get a nice little buzzer.
that's all right. You're ringing the point home, Jane.
That's right.
Saying amen.
Sorry, I forgot I have a phone right here.
Oh, that's the echo through the cosmos. Okay, so so there's a lot in this section. I'll just continue reading unless anybody has objections.
I don't have an objection, Tim, but I do want
You want to laugh? All right.
I do know that if the kingdom of heaven, if I am the kingdom of heaven, like it's within me, that's who and what I am, then Mr. Bronfman's statement that he's happy to give other people a heart attack is me seeing that and
It's a lot simpler, Shabana. It's a lot simpler. All it is your perception of this event. You don't have to worry about being in his shoes. It's just how you choose to perceive this. This event that's really, in reality, completely neutral. It's just some physical world thing. And how your response to it, your perception of it is the important thing.
well, I feel that my grandma was saying exactly the same thing. I mean, she didn't say it like that, but her actions spoke louder than words. And so, because I figure I need to atone for her.
Well,
Because
remember, atonement, the sole purpose of God's teacher is to accept the atonement for herself. We don't accept atonement for anybody else. We can't.
Well, I accept it for myself. And because we're all one, my grandma and Mr. Brofman get it too.
Yeah.
Because we're
Well,
vibrating at the same frequency.
Well, they certainly appreciate it.
You're quite welcome, Tim.
I'll speak for Karen. Thank you, Shabana. Okay. So, yes, I think it's just a nice little thought. The kingdom of heaven is you. That's one where a lot of these things, really what A Course in Miracles is, Matt, is it's a reprogramming of our subconscious and just a restructuring of our really deeply rooted beliefs that just don't seem to come to daylight in typical thought, where on day-to-day activity we're not really thinking about these really deeply rooted beliefs that we hold. And A Course in Miracles is a way, a course. It's a course of study designed to unravel all the knots and crap that's holding us back, and just start fresh and just make really solid connections. Start with a foundation of thought that's just rooted in truth. So a lot of what we read, it won't make sense. It doesn't make sense, but it's written in a certain particular way where sometimes like several months later, something will click just because it's like a seed planted in our mind that can germinate. So I think the kingdom of heaven is you. It may be one of those. So we're brought to this prayer at the end of paragraph 1, which says, "The kingdom is perfectly united and perfectly protected, and the ego will not prevail against it. Amen." Now, just something to note about this statement. It's a beautiful statement to hold if we ever feel like we're in a temptation of ego, we think that an ego desire is calling for us. There's a tendency, there's a mistake to think that there's a battle going on, that it's possible for the ego or darkness to prevail against light. That's not what this is implying. There's no battle. This is just a statement of fact. The ego will not prevail against it because it can't. There's no competition. Darkness doesn't compete with light. Light just shines it away. It's the same thing. Love doesn't conquer fear. It doesn't win or triumph. It just is. It just is. It presents itself. Truth doesn't need to defend itself against error. It's just true. And it'll just continue to be true. It doesn't defeat error. It's just true. So this is, in that light, this is just a statement of fact. The kingdom is perfectly united and perfectly protected, and the ego will not prevail against it. Amen. So this is written in the form of a prayer because it is useful in moments of temptation. It is a declaration of independence. You will find it very helpful if you understand it fully. The reason you need my help is because you have denied your own guide and therefore need guidance. So, okay, all of a sudden we get to a my in this, and I know I'm calling you out, Matt, but I thank you for joining us because this is a reason for explaining these things that have been explained a few times, and it's good to re-explain them. Also, if you ever need to say something, just interrupt me because I get on a roll and I keep chugging. But we get to a my here. My role is to separate the true from the false. My, who is this my? My, we could think of as Christ. Now, Christ, we're shown, is ourself, our true self. When we align with spirit, now A Course in Miracles kind of presents it this way. We're mind, and mind has the option, has the choice to choose spirit. Now, it can also delay in choosing spirit. It can kind of pause and say, well, do I want to choose spirit? It's not really a choice in itself, but that's what the ego is. It's a delay in choosing spirit. So when we're delaying in choosing spirit, then we're not identifying with Christ's self. When we choose spirit, we are Christ. So in this paragraph, my role is Christ. Now, if we are to say that I am ego, then my would be not ourself, but really, my is our highest self. So we don't read this, my role is to separate the true from the false, as something outside of ourself, to which we can bow down and revere. That's only if we are choosing to be separate, which is fine enough to start, but it's at least worth it to note that ultimately we want to read this, my role is to separate the true from the false, as our own words. We want to read that and say, my role, yes, that is my role. That's not someone else's role that I can access. My role. So that's really the way to read this. A Course in Miracles, you know, it's like a hammer. Now, is a hammer objectively right? The question doesn't make sense. Is a hammer a useful tool? Yes, it's a very useful tool. Guaranteed, I guarantee it. It's a very useful tool. It's been proven to work. It just works. It's a tool to be used. You can use it improperly, of course. You can go upside down and try to screw something in with a hammer. It's not going to work. But a hammer is designed to accomplish a certain job very well. A Course in Miracles is not setting out to define ultimate reality. It's not designed to set out a universal theology. It's a tool that works. It just works. It's a tool of thought, how we perceive things. So we don't have to worry about what is objectively true and how are these things oriented and certain questions don't really matter. But what we're presented with is a system of thought that just works. It's a very useful tool. So my role is to separate the true from the false. So truth can break through the barriers the ego has set up and can shine into your mind. Against our united strength, the ego cannot prevail. It is surely apparent by now why the ego regards spirit as its enemy. The ego arose from the separation, and its continued existence depends on your continuing belief in the separation. And again, we're presented with another pronoun here, your. Now, your is the mind that aligns with ego, the mind that delays in choosing spirit. So whether we identify with that or not is our choice. So we can't read this as if some Christ, some external Christ telling us that we're limited. We read this as your is the split mind. So let's see. The ego arose from the separation, and its continued existence depends on your continuing belief in the separation. The ego must offer you some sort of reward for maintaining this belief. All it can offer is a sense of temporary existence, which begins with its own beginning and ends with its own ending. It tells you this life is your existence because it is its own. Against this sense of temporary existence, spirit offers you the knowledge of permanence and unshakable being. No one who has experienced the revelation of this can ever fully believe in the ego again. How can its meager offering to you prevail against the glorious gift of God? You who identify with your ego cannot believe God loves you. You do not love what you made, and what you made does not love you. Being made out of the denial of the Father, the ego has no allegiance to its maker. You cannot conceive of the real relationship that exists between God and God's creations because of your hatred for the self you made. Now, some of this language seems extreme, but it's designed that way. It's designed to show us that even just subtle, it's like, oh, well, I just like the ego in this respect. A Course in Miracles says any small allegiance to ego is full allegiance to ego. That's why it uses strong language here by design. Hatred, by choosing ego. And it's like, well, it can't be brute. And then, oh, I see. Choosing any bit of the ego is to choose all the ego, which includes hatred. You project onto the ego the decision to separate, and this conflicts with the love you feel for the ego because you made it. Now, there's a difference between creation and making here. Karen, what do you think? Is this a topic worthy of further discussion?
It is, or perhaps miscreation.
Miscreation. What would you, Karen? How would you explain the difference between creation and making, or what is miscreation and how you presented it.
Yeah, I mean, this is where I get a little bit tongue-tied, right? Mind-tied. So Course in Miracles distinguishes between creating and making. Creating is that which comes from love, always, only, solely. Making is what comes from our ego mind, our perception mind. That's making in this so-called illusory world. Creating is always, it's just love extended. That's creating, that's creation. Now, miscreating, I hear in A Course in Miracles, not to confuse you, Matt, with my own confusion, but miscreating is a term that comes up in also talking about creating something from wrong-minded thinking. So I guess I need you to tease that out, Tim.
Okay, so I think the simplest way to think about this whole, everything you said is correct, Karen. And I think a simple way to think about creation versus making is making involves physical things. You make something out of something. So all you're really doing is repurposing some physical matter. We make a computer. We make a phone. All of this stuff already existed. Body. We make a body. The plants make leaves. It's taking matter, all these things that already exist, and just putting it together in a different way. That's making. Creation is actually adding to creation. So love, sharing love, as we said, with ideas, and love operates the same way. Truth is created the moment it's shared. So that's creation. Any thought or action with that support of love that creates, that's creation. And miscreations, I believe, is pretty much tied to making. This whole concept of miscreation. I think that's coming from a place of lack, and perhaps there may be a section to say otherwise in here, but perhaps it's essentially being presented, being given the opportunity to create, to love, and not choosing it. So it doesn't hold any reality in the real world. It doesn't exist. There are no miscreations in the kingdom of heaven. But in this physical world, the effects of miscreations can be apparent. It doesn't make them real. It's just a product of the physical world where it's kind of neutral. Good or bad, who knows? Both. But the beautiful thing is in this kingdom, this reality, eternity, there are no miscreations. There's nothing made. It's just only that which came from love and truth and joy. All of our loving thoughts that we've ever had are preserved and in this kingdom state of being. So it's not a coincidence. This is a very technical course in many ways. A lot of the words carry a technical meaning. So the sentence that we just read, you cannot conceive of the real relationship that exists between God and God's creation because your hatred for the self you made. Very specifically used made instead of created, for instance. You project onto the ego the decision to separate, and this conflicts with the love you feel for the ego because you made it. No love in this world is without this ambivalence. And since no ego has experienced love without ambivalence, the concept is beyond its understanding. Love will enter immediately into any mind that truly wants it, but it must want it truly. This means that it wants it without ambivalence. And this kind of wanting is wholly without the ego's drive to get. And this is, again, back to our the importance of wanting it fully. In other words, seeing, understanding this treasure, this how does it So against this sense of temporary existence, which the ego offers, spirit offers you the knowledge of permanence and unshakable being. So presented with this temporary limited existence of stuff and permanence, unshakable being of eternal peace, which one do we want to choose? Now, there's no compromise between either one. We can't have one and the other. It's one or the other, and we can't be fully committed sometimes. So that's what it means. That's what, at least one way to think about wanting it fully is just making the choice, and I've made this choice for permanence and unshakable being of spirit. And there's no question after this. It's not a choice to be made, you know, every minute we make a choice. It's a choice to be made, period. You make it once. And if there's wavering back and forth, if there's vacillations between both, all that means is that the choice has not yet been made. That's just equivalent to being in ego. This is what's called the split mind. And Kathy, I'm sorry, I don't really see your messages on this phone.
I can read the message. It says, as I wake up to my body, I become aware that love and creation feel wonderful, and being in miscreation does not. As I pay attention to my intuition and understand what the feeling is offering to me, I choose to feel the love and spend my time there. It's really beautiful. Thank you, Kathy.
Absolutely. Matt, I don't know if you want to, I mean, this is so tied into with conversations of God, with feeling. I don't know if you want to bring in anything from that text to just, I mean, give a different perspective on that.
It is very tied in. But what I found interesting is the first thought that popped into my mind when I read the first day or two of the daily activities wasn't actually conversations with God. It was actually with Landmark Forum. Has everyone done Landmark Forum or heard of Landmark Forum? Landmark Forum is a 2 or 3 day course that, looking back on now, it has actually some similarities with a Course in Miracles. The penultimate teachings of Landmark and meaning is of Landmark Forum is what is it? Life has no meaning. It is meaningless. It only has meaning in which you grant it. In fact, to say that life is meaningless is in itself applying meaning to life, and that in itself is meaningless. And that's the first thing that popped into my head, and that connection actually goes, for me personally, it actually goes a bit further. So that's the first thing that popped in my head. This goes into a lot of detail about ego, more than what I recall from conversations with God. But conversation with God is, yes, very much about what do you feel is true, what do you intuit is true. I don't recall it discussing split mind versus split spirit, split mind spirit. But one thing I do find, I do query along those lines is, if there is naught but God, then the ego is God as well. The ego has been created by God to serve a purpose. Well, would that not be correct? The ego serves a purpose. The ego serves to uphold the illusion of separation, which has been created intentionally. So therefore, the ego has also been created by God. But
I'd really love to hear the ACIM point of view on this, because so separation happened. Let's start there. There was this thing called separation, and then ego arose after that. There was no ego, and I think that's what you said also, Matthew. There was no ego before separation. But what I hear you saying is that God created separation or created ego. Did I hear you say?
There's naught but God. Anything that has existed, does exist, and will exist has already been created in the kingdom of God. There's nothing that exists. All our thoughts, the thoughts that you've had, are having now, and will have in the future, already exist.
Right.
Sorry, yeah, Karen, yeah.
But does ego really exist, and does separation really exist?
No, it doesn't really exist. No, it doesn't. But the illusion of the ego does exist.
Mm-hmm.
And that was created by God to create the illusion of separation. Otherwise...
I mean, I have the same question, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you're not stating it as a question, but Tim?
No. I guess I am in a way. In a way, I am posing as a question because that's my current understanding, and I'm certainly open to the conversation. So.
Yeah. I agree, Matt. I agree that in that, particularly in the way that A Course in Miracles presents things, it's almost as if the ego should be condemned. Like, how dare you? But if you really understand what it's saying, and coming from conversations with God also in that, really, who are we to judge anything? That God did create everything. I think what it comes down to, it's not that God created us, and we have to be careful about what that means. God created us, and really we're part of God, so we created this grand division. I believe is maybe that's the Course in Miracles.
The grandest vision, the grandest vision of the greatest version you can ever imagine about yourself. I think that's right.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, beautiful.
Yeah.
And so, but what I think is rooted in is what we're believing in, what we perceive things to be, because we can be coming from this pinhole of perception, but kind of seeing it like a video game where this is not me. I'm not really separate from everything that I see here. I think that's where the illusion comes in, and that's not what God created. By projecting separation onto all we see, there can be a tendency to say that God created separation, but that's just a mistake that we made in perceiving in the first place.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Because but don't forget too that in order to create ourselves as God and to create ourselves as His equal, the first thing we have to do is create the opposite. So yeah, and that's where separation comes in. Is you've got to start from a state of separation in order to create the oneness. Oneness does not exist in that in which it is not. So separation, in my current opinion, because I'm always open to evolve, is it has a purpose, and the purpose is to provide the opposite of oneness. Therefore, it should be blessed. It should be blessed and accepted. But I'm not feeling, as you said before, I feel that there's this attack against the ego, an attack against separation, rather than using it what it's intended for, accepting it, loving it, using it, and then just moving on from it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense, everyone? Am I making sense, or because if my current understanding has got some misunderstandings, please, I'm all open to the conversation. So.
What I will say, Matt, I agree with you completely, and that to condemn any part of God is to condemn God. So
yes,
to condemn
right.
any decision that we make, to condemn it is to condemn God. I completely agree. And so again, I think to come to this awareness and to be in the God state, to be connected, to know the connection, to experience the oneness, to experience it, to know it experientially, we need to first know the opposite of it, which is separation. That's not to condemn it. God's greatest gift to itself, to God's self. I believe that's the words used. But there's a reason why Conversations with God is available to us as a tool to understanding this. And A Course in Miracles is just like Conversations with God is a tool.
It's a tool, absolutely. Yeah.
No statement of finality. It's not setting out to define objective truth. So I think that's also something to be certainly aware of and keep in our mind that we're not, because I understand being there is it does seem as if we're attacking an ego here in this language.
Yeah, and I wanted to thank you, Matt, for bringing that up. It's not anything I had recognized, and I'm going to watch my language on the heels of this conversation. It's almost like the ultimate moment of that atonement, that self-forgiveness is for judging ego. Right?
Yeah.
Right?
Good point.
Like,
yes.
Yeah, it's like, before this moment, I was like, oh yeah, I see all the rest of those judgments and all the rest of those discernments and all of that, misperceptions of what's truly reality, truly love. But I hadn't really considered the misperception of ego or the wrong thinking or the judgment of it as something that should not be in this world where it is, as you so beautifully pointed out. So I thank you for that.
Oh, no, I'm very honored to have brought that message to you, Karen. Absolutely.
Yes.
It's brought out some good, sounds like it's brought out some good conversations. That's awesome. But
yes.
Exactly as the book says, this is our conversation with God. So,
that's right. That is it.
Yeah. This is God awakening God. So
Yeah. So fun.
Yeah. This is quite exciting, actually. Sorry, Tim. Oh, sorry.
So I'd just like to add something. I want to echo Karen's, what Karen's just said, but I'd like to illustrate it with something. What is that noise? Sherry Bradshaw, my goodness.
My phone started going off. I forgot I hadn't have it turned off, so I quickly muted my.
Yeah, I mean, really.
Good one.
About the ego, I opened a book in which the divine attributes, I'm Muslim, are written out. I mean, I follow a Sufi path, which is anathema to Orthodox Islam, but there are divine attributes which are often the opposite of each other, like the one that I just opened the book to a page which had two attributes. One was basically, I can say the Arabic name is Ya Muntakimo, is the one who takes vengeance. And for the Sufis, you're supposed to take vengeance on your ego. And I started to scratch my head because Tim keeps saying that the ego is nothing, and the Course in Miracles says the same. But the other attribute was the forgiver. And all I know is that the Course in Miracles is basically saying a very crude expression that one of my friends told me many, many years ago, is that I've been digging around for so long, there's got to be a pony somewhere, you know?
A pony?
Okay, yeah.
So that's the idea of what you just expressed so beautifully, Matthew, which is that the ego is the blessing, which is helping me find the pony.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, you're all
I
welcome.
appreciate your adding this. And what time is it for you in Australia?
Right now, it is just gone past 9 a.m.
Okay, so I hope you'll come back.
Unfortunately, this time slot is normally at 8 a.m. my time, which is a work time for me. But I do get the invitation, so whenever I can, I will be present. But unfortunately, that will be the exception, not the rule. So,
Well, thanks for coming today.
Yeah, and thank you for letting me know the impact I've made and my input. I feel really honoured that I have touched, particularly at the moment, Shabana and Karen. I feel honoured that I've played a part in your awakening. Thank you for also awakening me as well, because in your truth, I have realised that I have spoken truth as well. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Karen, what's the right answer?
You're welcome, Shabana.
Thank you, Shabana.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
I got it wrong. Thank you, Teresa. Thank you, Shabana.
Thank you, and you're welcome.
All right, here we go.
Excellent. So let's just continue reading as the sun begins to set. I'll have to turn on the light here. Let's see. So, paragraph 5. There is a kind of experience so different from anything the ego can offer that you will never want to cover or hide it again. It is necessary to repeat that your belief in darkness and hiding is why the light cannot enter. The Bible gives many references to the immeasurable gifts which are for you, but for which you must ask. This is not a condition as the ego sets conditions. It is the glorious condition of what you are. No force except your own will is strong enough or worthy enough to guide you. In this you are as free as God, and must remain so forever. Let us ask the Father in my name to keep you mindful of his love for you, and yours for him. He has never failed to answer this request, because it asks only for what God has already willed. Those who call truly are always answered. Thou shalt have no other gods before God, because there are none. It has never really entered your mind to give up every idea you ever had that opposes knowledge. You retain thousands of little scraps of fear that prevent the holy from entering. Light cannot penetrate through the walls you make to block it, and it is forever unwilling to destroy what you have made. Holy One, Holy Spirit, or even God is forever unwilling to destroy what we have made. No one can see through a wall, but I, Christ's self, can step around it. Watch your mind for the scraps of fear, or you will be unable to ask me to do so. I can help you only as our Father created us. I will love you and honor you and maintain complete respect for what you have made, but I will not uphold it unless it is true. And let's see. Before we continue, this is I believe a very important and useful concept here. This whole concept of this is Christ saying this, or Holy Spirit, we can imagine.
Yeah.
I will love you and honor you and maintain complete respect for what you have made, but I will not uphold it unless it is true. Now, we have made this distinction between creating and making has this kind of physical world property where it can be true or it can be not true. We're told through A Course in Miracles, Christ says to us, if we're identifying with ego, that Christ will not uphold what we've made unless it is true. Now, this is something, if we choose to be Christ's self, if we choose to align with Christ's self, this is something that we implement in our daily being, in our eternal here now being. To love and honor and maintain complete respect for what we all have made, but not to uphold it unless it is true. First example, the first something that comes to mind that could not be true is sickness, illness. If somebody, one of our neighbors, comes to us with a sickness, talking about the sickness that they have and how they are not well, we can love and honor and maintain complete respect for this sharing with us. But it's important for us not to hold it as real, not to share it and thus give it more substance. This is not dismiss something, but to see through to the Christ self within this friend. If this friend is sick, the body is sick. It's always a mind choosing sickness in body. Mind and spirit cannot be sick. It doesn't make sense. So we see this person for the perfect spirit that they are. There is no sickness. It's, Jesus healed all these folks not by seeing the sickness in them, but by seeing the complete health in the healed self in them. So that's one way of rephrasing this. Being respectful for what is made, but to not uphold it unless it is true. What do you think about that one, Karen?
Oh, Karen. I heard the word Karen.
I have to turn on the light.
Oh my God, my mind was so wandering.
All right, now Karen, you're no longer called on Teresa.
I think that's a great example.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, I like the example you used.
Yeah, because that's something that can actually be, that's a miscreation. That's a great example of going back to what you said before, Karen, is this miscreation.
Yeah.
An illness is a miscreation.
Truth, perception, misperception, knowledge. So that purity, that onion pearl of knowledge, and then all the stuff we put around it, right? That gets in the way.
Well,
the onion pearl of knowledge.
The onion pearl of knowledge. And I think it's an important part of this section is loving and honoring you and maintaining complete respect for what you have made. Because if we're in some kind of role as, healing arts or whatever, and somebody comes with something and they believe in that something, we certainly don't want to say, oh, no, you don't. Right? So loving and honoring them as they show up, but at the same time, what is our perception of that person? Holding them in the highest light, holding them in light as who they really are. And there is no sickness there. So both at the same time.
Yeah. It's, there's that, there's a song, it's John, it used to be Abraham, John, and Martin, but it was John, Martin, and Bobby, and it has a segment of what the world needs now is love, sweet love, that song. It's the kind of compilation. And they have a segment of, they ask a little child, you know, what is segregation? And the child goes, I don't know what segregation is. What is bigotry? I don't know what that is. And all these concepts. I like, you know, I think, you know, the ego way to perceive this is, oh, the innocent mind doesn't know like the truths of the world of separation. But no, wait, that's God's answer. I don't know what separation and bigotry is. I don't know. I don't see it. I don't know what that is. There's just such a truth to that. And so I think just that innocence and if, you know, if somebody is speaking of a sickness or something that's, you know, could be detrimental to health, is it's not combating. It's, you know, when something doesn't exist, it just doesn't, it's not that it bounces off you. It just, you see right through it. There's no acknowledgement. There's not even a debate. It's not so much as, it's not a conversation of right and wrong. It's just, it doesn't exist. It's not convincing somebody that they're not sick. It's just not at all reinforcing that thought. Just they can speak as and talk about it as much and being patiently, you know, giving an ear and just supporting, but not to say, oh, that's too bad, or oh no, what's next, but just to, oh, you look so nice, you know, like there are so many things that we could say in each moment, and to give it any attention is to give it, make it true for us. So I think just staying in spirit maybe helps us with that.
So is that just like holding loving space, Tim, for them?
I'm going to jump in because I'm reminded again about Dr. Len and the Ho'oponopono healing system. You know, if some of you know, some of you don't know, he worked in a psychiatric ward of very intensely violent and mentally upset individuals, and he never met one of his patients, not a one. He sat in his office with their files and just did his Ho'oponopono chanting of I love you and whatever those 4 things were. Kathy knows them. And they were all healed, you know, over some amount of time, purely because of what we're talking about here. He only held them in that light of who they really are, who they really were. That just consistent. That was it. He never, like I said, he never even met them. So that's the power of it. That's the power of holding somebody, as holding ourselves and each other as who we really are. God. Waking up to that awareness.
Kathy, you'll have to come in and pronounce that gentleman's name,
please.
Kathy knows it. Kathy?
Yeah.
if you
Come
can.
on,
Oh, here she is.
tell us the name.
You don't have to, Kathy.
Dr. Lenny Waliwaki, something like that.
Stop
Sorry,
it, Karen.
I can never remember it.
Here's Kathy. Oh no, never mind. I think Kathy's tied up. It's okay.
I have stuff to say if she's not going to say things.
Go ahead.
So what I was going to tell you is that that's lovely, because I watched it on YouTube and I'm doing it, but that's not what I wanted to tell you about. I don't know if I'm making this up, but Dr. Jerry Jampolsky, in one of his adventures, ran out in a hospital, and someone had AIDS and he couldn't care less about being spattered with this blood, because he was more interested in saving the man. Now, this story could be true, and it could be that I've made it up, but either way, I think it's a lovely story. And the only thing that I know for sure is that my dad was a doctor in the Second World War, and he ran across a field of, fire or whatever to save someone or some people, whatever. And he got a medal for conspicuous gallantry in the field of battle. And he didn't get shot, just like Jerry Jampolsky didn't get AIDS. Because some of these doctors are actually good-hearted.
Beautiful. Yeah, absolutely.
So,
And,
yeah, it is really important to trust.
yeah, like,
You-
Jesus touching the lepers, he didn't squirm. Anyway, were you saying something, Sherry?
Well, the four, Dr. Lynn, I can't remember his last name, but the four sayings are, I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, and I thank you. And he says them over and over and over again. And that's what we're supposed, it sort of reminded me of when you were talking about atonement.
Thank
Because
you.
it's about, he said it's about himself. It was never about the prisoners. It was about himself. He is, some aspect of himself could relate. It's almost like when they talk about the shadow version of ourselves that we are not aware of. Within all of us, we have the person who's capable of murder and the person who's capable of slander, whatever it is, we all have it in us. And so when he did that, he was actually holding that space for himself and asking for forgiveness. And so he would take the files and he would read the files, and then he would go within himself and he would ask for forgiveness and say, I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, and I thank you, over and over and over again. Yeah, so that's the most interesting story. I actually have his course that I had taken a long time ago, so I don't remember it really well, but he was an incredible man too. Oh yeah, yeah, and it's all about intention.
Thank you so much for that, Sherry, filling that out. And I took the course a long time ago too. It's about claiming one's identity as I, capital I.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
The one thing I'd like to add to this, and this is excellent, thank you everybody for sharing, is something that A Course in Miracles presents, which I believe is fairly novel, or a really cool way of thinking about it, helpful in many ways, is that thinking this whole concept of private thoughts is an ego belief, that the thoughts that we think are only limited to our mind, if that even makes sense, that our mind is separate from other minds. Now, often we kind of keep this as a subconscious belief that we have this private mind and our thoughts are private to ourselves. But there's a lot of baggage that this belief comes with. One way of unpacking this baggage, A Course in Miracles presents us with this thought, this little line. Essentially, we must not allow our brother to belittle himself through our mind. So when we're thinking, when we perceive somebody as ill, we can see it as ourself perceiving another as ill, or we can see it as allowing this individual to perceive themselves as ill through us. Now, our job is to stop that. We can start to see it and say, no, I don't see you that way. I see you. I won't let you see yourself that way. I will only show you the perfection that is you. That's
Mhm.
the only way I choose to see you,
Mhm.
which I think is just such an awesome.
Yep.
Yes.
Other
It is.
minds perceive themselves through us. That's
Mhm.
empowering in many ways.
Mhm.
Well,
Yeah.
Tim, if I hadn't seen you with the long hair, I would be feeling very sad that you've got premature baldness.
It's growing. It's growing,
I
Shabana.
think you look very handsome.
Same
I
exact
like
rate.
it. I
Well,
think you should.
I'm just glad you do have hair, Tim, because I've seen you with it. I just like to see the best part of you.
Thanks. Thanks for reflecting it back upon myself. Thank you for allowing myself to see that through you, Shabana.
Well, I only see your perfection, Tim, so you're quite welcome.
I expect
Thank
nothing
you,
less.
Shabana.
You're welcome, Garrett.
Are you guys just sick of that already?
Continue.
A little inside joke.
Well, Teresa, you haven't done any counseling today, so you should say something.
I have been quieter today. I'm feeling very reflective and I don't know. I guess I am feeling a little quieter. I enjoy the peace.
Perfection.
I wish I had a problem to bring to you.
That's an intention to set, huh?
Yeah.
So, I'm sure there'll be one next week. But let's continue reading now. So we just finished off with that. We will not uphold it unless it is true.
Yeah.
And that was an excellent discussion. I think everybody really made a nice, brought in a nice way of looking at that. I will never forsake you any more than God will, but I must wait as long as you choose to forsake yourself. Because I wait in love and not in impatience, you will surely ask me truly. I will come in response to a single, unequivocal call. Watch carefully and see what it is you are really asking for. Be very honest with yourself in this. For me, we must hide nothing from each other. If you will really try to do this, you have taken the first step toward preparing your mind for the Holy One to enter. We will prepare for this together, for once he has come, you will be ready to help me make other minds ready for him. How long will you deny him his kingdom? In your own mind, though denied by the ego, is the declaration of your release. God has given you everything. And this, Matt, I think this is a line that's, I think, you pretty much walked in earlier with conversations with God and God creating everything. Yes, God has given you everything. This one fact means the ego does not exist, and this makes it profoundly afraid. In the ego's language, to have and to be are different, but they are identical to the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit knows that you both have everything and are everything. Any distinction in this respect is meaningful only when the idea of getting, which implies a lack, has already been accepted. That is why we make no distinction between having the kingdom of God and being the kingdom of God. And this was earlier discussion, I believe, suffices. The calm being of God's kingdom, which in your sane mind is perfectly conscious, is ruthlessly banished from the part of the mind the ego rules. The ego is desperate because it opposes literally invincible odds whether you are asleep or awake. Consider how much vigilance you have been willing to exert to protect your ego, and how little to protect your right mind. Who but the insane would undertake to believe what is not true, and then protect this belief at the cost of truth? So, I know there's something you have to say, Shabana. Maybe not.
I don't.
I'd say it's a miracle, but I was hoping that you would have something to say. That's okay.
Well, I have to say that this takes me back to my first response to your comment, Matt, where I said, I have that same question, really, because there are a few lines here, and this last line, who but the insane would undertake to believe what is not true and then protect this belief at the cost of truth? I hear that as saying that ego is an untruth, is not true. And then, Matt, what I heard you say from Conversations of God is that ego is true, is created by God. So this is something that I am going to be thinking about more. Not because either of these are, gospel or sacred, anything like that, but they are tools. But because I see them not saying the same thing, and maybe they are saying the same thing, and I just haven't been able to see exactly where that is.
If I might qualify, the ego is not real in ultimate kingdom. It's only, the ego itself is still an illusion, but it's a created illusion. Because the separation cannot exist. The illusion of separation cannot exist without the illusion of ego. And what stands out for me from the text that Tim has been reading is where your higher self says, I will step, so I'm trying to find it, Tim, maybe you can help me out, where it says something about stepping aside or stepping around the ego.
Yeah, the wall that
me,
you made.
Yeah, for me, that's for some reason, that's what sticks out of this text the most, because it's not about denying the ego. It's not about resisting the ego. It's about simply acknowledging that it's a created illusion, and we just got to simply step around it somehow. And I suppose we all find our own path in doing so. So the ego, how I see it, the ego may be true in the illusion. Does that help, Karen, at all about how I see it?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's a tool that's been created, a mental tool that's been created for separation, so that we can experience oneness when we so choose.
That's the ultimate path, right?
Yeah, that's the ultimate path. Yeah.
That's my little sticky point here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because it sounds like that's a necessary thing. And I don't know that I can't quite bring through the words what I'm feeling, but there's something about when we are we have fully claimed our identity as who we really are, which is capital I and God, then there is no need for recognizing the oneness. It's just a matter of being the oneness. So
you are the oneness.
There is this game, there is this illusory world where we're playing this out, and we're going through this whole thing of recognizing this, and ego certainly has its place there because of the opposites, the separation and the oneness. But again, the necessity of that makes me feel like I'm concretizing that.
Do you think that like the closer that you get to the oneness, though, does it really, like for me, it hasn't really, probably before when I was more feeling the separation, maybe so, but now that I feel closer to the oneness and everything, I feel joy in it. And I see that everything has been a gift in bringing me to this. And although I may not be there every moment, it doesn't feel like conquering. It feels like it's just like sort of, I don't know, breathing it in. And
concrete, like cement.
Oh, concrete. I thought you said concrete.
I think I might have made that word up.
Concrete. Okay, I thought you meant conquering, like you're having a battle with your ego. Oh, sorry.
No, and I think in this game and in this, we're doing all of these things we're doing is about making a happier world, and that's in A Course in Miracles somewhere. It's like We can make this happier world. And then ultimately, when we're fully living that happier world, that's what we talked about last week, that little tiny bridge,
Yeah.
right? Where you just get like drawn up into the fullness of being, rather than still being in a state of recognizing that there is oneness with all these disparate parts are actually one, that conversation isn't even being had once you just get pulled up over that little bridge.
I wish I would have been there for that.
Just little.
Yeah. Sounds like that was a really nice conversation. By the way, I apologize for last week. I got the time wrong. I thought it was like our program, Conscious Leadership, and 6 p.m., but no. So I know better now.
That's all right.
Yeah.
Right on time.
Yeah.
But this has just been such an entertaining and inspiring conversation today. Really, really fun.
Yes, it has.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's funny you should mention that, Karen. I have to support you on that comment. I mean, I look at this conversation between 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 of us, and what brings joy to me is just watching the conversations. I don't feel that anyone has spoken just to talk. I feel that everyone has been inspired and everyone has contributed, and I feel there's great joy and great growth in that.
Yes.
Absolutely. I would like to say, just all this, it really has unfolded. It's such a nice conversation. I have to echo what everybody is saying. And I think what I must contribute at this point is that God, it's not the tool of the ego that's the issue, that's the problem. It's limiting our identity to it. It's kind of like you look at all the cosmos, and you zoom in on the galaxy and the planet and the things, and you look at this one little person that's standing there and say, yes, that's me. Like, that's the mistake. Whereas really is I'm just going to choose this perspective and look upon myself, and all is good, and everything that I create, just in wonder all around, and being God, looking upon God. I think that's the
May I share?
Lord.
I love you guys, you know that. And I'm so sorry I was late. Once again, I had a family member who was in emergency and what have you. But here I am. And I feel that from my experience, when I was listening to all of you, and I don't always express myself properly, but I see the ego. I had a lot of experience with shadow. And then I go, well, wait a minute, you don't have shadow without the light, and we don't have love. Do we wake up to the love without the ego? And I understand that because we've talked about this so much about separation can't be, right? Everything is, I know it gets complicated in the head, or maybe it isn't. It's simple, it should be kept simple. But for me in my life experience, the ego is loving, because from my experience through the pain, it gives me that option to choose the love. So in a way, it's like ego is like the shadow and the sun, and they're both they're one, and they're taking you towards the light or taking you towards the love. That's the gift in it. And it's a backwards way, but without the pain experiences of the pain and suffering, I wouldn't, if my life was so easy, I wouldn't have the aware of the contrast. And without the aware of the contrast, it didn't give me the opportunity to choose the other. Which would I choose? And so that's kind of how I see they're both needed in a way. Or until in my life, maybe if I was this fabulously awakened being, I would be very aware that all that was unnecessary. But it's been the path for me. There's always a gift every time in that darkness or shadow life, or the big chatty ego that loves to show up when I'm getting closer on the other side. It could be looked at as loving, just trying to say, stay over there, this ain't good, get over there. And so that's how I see the gift. And I love that you offer this format, and I love that it's safe to share and express as we do. And it's not, to me, it's supposed to be easier. In my head, I know I make things more complicated, but it is heady. And Karen, I'm so grateful for that comment in regards to, it's so easy to go into work, to look back and go into the judgment place of myself where I've messed up. And then I go into that dark web or that quicksand of just not where I want to go. So it's understanding the willingness to be here and to listen and to share and to love ourselves, realize we're really okay. And just to do this is fabulous. What a gift this is.
Well, thank you for your willingness, Kathy.
Yeah, I want to spend my time here 24/7, you guys, because as soon as we go down, then back off into the crazy world. But at least I now have the awareness, and I can choose more and more and go, this ain't feeling good. I had a darling niece who would say, this isn't feeling good. And I go, wow, I love you. In my upbringing, it was that got numbed. And I could say it, but nothing changed, or you couldn't express or whatever. But it's just that easy. Does this feel good? Well, if it doesn't, then heads up. Heads up. And that simple. What a gift. So thank you.
It is simple. Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you, Kathy. Just before we end, can you please say that, like, I missed you. I was bragging that you knew the name of the doctor in Hawaii.
Oh, I love Dr. Ihaliakala Hulen.
Thank you.
What a
No,
lovely way to say it.
I
all
love it.
It's like
Dr.
a song.
Well, he actually says that it, because of Ho'oponopono, for any of those that are unaware of it, and it's all about the power of love. And but he said, whether you say the word Hawaii or Ho'oponopono or his name, it all offers the blessing. And I do, because it just it lifts my spirit every time I say it. So Dr.
Say it again. Say it again.
Dr. Ihaliakala Hulen. I love it. I'll say it for you as many times as you want. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm just so happy that you're here now to say it. It is beautiful. And I love you, Kathy.
I love you, Shabana, and I love seeing it. I love hearing your laugh. It's, oh my God, so much time in the heavy and seriousness of life. It's like, oh girl, I gotta laugh at myself. Laugh or cry, but thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for requesting that, Shabana. Jane, I have to give you the last word. We didn't let you get a conversation in edgewise, so you'll have to give us the last word for the day.
Have a very good week,
Excellent.
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank
I
you,
love
Jane.
you all.
That's all we need for this week.
Thank you, Raoul,
So
for
thank you.
being here.
Yeah, thank you, Raul.
I love
Absolutely.
it.
Shabana,
The
Karen,
team is
Jane,
growing.
Kathy.
It's growing, Tim. Tim and Karen, look at that. The team is growing.
Thank
We had
you
a
very
guest
much,
here.
Dean.
Thank you, Raul. We had a guest, our honorary Conversations with God spokesman in Matt this week. So thank you.
Spokesman? Oh, wow. Don't put him up on a pedestal or anything, but.
Well, we look forward to the next time you'll be able to drop in, Matt.
Oh, thank you, Karen. Appreciate it. Yes. I look forward to the next time as well. So,
Love you, everybody.
yeah.
Love
Karen,
you.
Teresa.
Bye.
Have a good week.
Thank
Bye.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
coming in.
Thank
God
you, Tim.
bless.
God bless.
Okay.
All right, bye.
Love you.
Bye bye.